Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today we are going to have a very detailed session on important American writers for UGC NET English literature. So if you are a very serious NET aspirant or English literature, if you are preparing for English literature examination and you are focusing on the core papers of the English, so then this video is definitely going to be for you, because today we'll walk through the most significant American authors, their key works, styles, and why they matter from an exam point of view. So let's get started with our important American writers that is going to be helpful for the UGC NET English literature exam. So before jumping into important American writers, let's begin by understanding the broad historical flow of American literature. And we have divided it into 6 major periods for you to understand better. The first period is the Puritan or the colonial period, which lasts from 1600 to 1800, if we'll say. And it was the early religious and political writings were happening in this particular period. The second period was Romanticism and Transcendentalism, which lasts from 1800 to 1865, and it focuses in this period, the main focus was on imagination, nature, and individualism. So just like British literature, American literature has also some periods, and due to the impact of those periods, how that impact has how that particular period has impacted the writers and how they should write. So it's just like British literature, and I have already made a video on British literature series. So those who haven't watched it, please go and watch the British literature series, and I think that will be very much helpful if you have any kind of doubt regarding the British literature. Now let's come back to our American literary periods. So after Romanticism and Transcendentalism, which ended in 1865, we have come to realism and naturalism. So realism and naturalism, this particular period was from 1865 to 1914, and in this period, the period was mostly about post-Civil War realism, we can say in today's Gen Z language, what reality check they got after the World War I or World War II. Okay, and human psychology, fate, these kind of themes we'll find in this particular period. Next, moving on to the fourth period, that is modernism, which lasted from 1914 to 1945. And this particular period was based on experimental forms, loss of faith due to the World War I and World War II, and urban alienation. Now comes the fifth period, that is Harlem Renaissance. So this Harlem Renaissance, it lasted from 1920 to 1930s. So in this particular period, we'll find the explosion of the black voices and the cultural pride that showcases this particular movement. Now coming back to the last American literary period, that was postmodernism and contemporary literary period. So it lasted from 1945, and now also we can say that we are in the phase of postmodernism. Okay, so fragmentation, metafiction, identity politics, these are some of the themes of postmodernism and contemporary literary period. So understanding about these eras helps you to locate the writers within their philosophical and historical boundaries or context, we can say. Now, coming back to the important writers, in the first period, as I told you, that Puritan and colonial period was the first period of the American literary history. And the earliest American writers were Puritan and settlers. So, two key figures here are Anne Bradstreet and Jonathan Edwards, who are important from exam point of view. That's why only I'm discussing it. If you want to know more about the writers that falls into this period, then you can take help of online, or you can ask me. I'll post a detailed video, but later, as of now, from the exam point of view, I'm only posting the important writers. Okay, if we talk about Anne Bradstreet, so she is known as the first published American poet, and her poetry blends personal life like motherhood, family, that is connected with deep Puritan religious themes. So her works like the 10th Muse, if I'll say one line about her works, she writes about loss, suffering, and divine faith, and all within the context of the 17th century colonial life. So she is known as the first published American poet. Now, if we talk about Jonathan Edwards, so he was a preacher during the Great Awakening period, and his famous sermon, The Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, is filled with vivid metaphors of hell and damnation, which was very typical of the Calvinist ideology. So in exams, he is a key figure representing the early American religious writings. In the second period, that is Romanticism and Transcendentalism, as we talked that this period or this era, it values the emotion, nature, and individual freedom, and it includes some of the most frequently asked authors. So it's important for you to know and remember them. The first author we are going to talk is Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was the father of American Transcendentalism, and his essays like Self-Reliance and American, it kind of nature, and it kind of promote the trusting, that you should trust yourself, means one should trust themselves, and it connects us with the nature. So he is often very much quoted in the exam, so you should definitely read about Ralph Waldo Emerson. And just remember that the themes around which his works are based are transcendentalism, individualism. These are some of the basic themes. Okay, the second writer that falls into this period of Romanticism and Transcendentalism is Henry David Thoreau. So his masterpiece, Walden, is about living simply in nature, while civil disobedience, it influenced Gandhi and Gandhian philosophy. So Thoreau, he represents the non-violent resistance and environmental consciousness. The third writer was Edgar Allan Poe, who was a master of the Gothic literature, and his works like The Raven, The Telltale Heart are filled with madness, supernaturalism, and psychological horror. And he also wrote the first modern detective story, The Murders in the Rue Morgue. So you should definitely read about Edgar Allan Poe before you go into the exam. The fourth writer of Romanticism and Transcendentalism period was the author of the Scarlet Letter, the famous author Nathaniel Hawthorne. So the author of Scarlet Letter, Nathaniel Hawthorne, was so famous because this particular novel, Scarlet Letter, is all about sin, guilty, and societal hypocrisy in a very Puritan setting. So it's a very famous novel, okay? And he blends allegory with dark romanticism. So you'll often find questions on a symbolism like a letter A or the forest. So you should definitely read about all of these writers because they are very much important from the exam point of view. Now we have the third period, that was Realism and Naturalism. So post-Civil War America saw a shift from idealism to realistic portrayals of life, social problems, and human psychology. And the first writer was Mark Twain. So he was called the father of American literature. You should remember that Mark Twain was called the father of American literature. And his famous work, The Huckleberry Finn, is both humorous and serious. You should definitely read this work. And if I talk about this particular work, it tackles race, slavery, and moral dilemmas through satire and reverse symbolism. The second writer was Henry James, and his novel novels explore the inner consciousness and class between the old world, which was Europe, and the new world, which was America. So his style is psychological, very much psychological, we can say, and especially in the work The Portrait of a Lady, which was the most famous work, and so many questions have been asked from this particular work or from Henry James. So you should definitely remember to read all about Henry James, Mark Twain, and Stephen Crane. The third writer was Stephen Crane, who was a very naturalist writer, we can say, and he was best known for the Red Badge of Courage, which was a realistic depiction of war and internal fear. And his characters often face forces beyond their control, which was a hallmark of naturalism. Now, the fourth era, that is modernism. So, modernist literature breaks away from the tradition, as we have already discussed in the British literature series, and it uses some of the experimental styles to reflect the alienation, fragmentation, and the loss of faith after the World War I. And the first writer under this period that we are going to discuss is F. Scott Fitzgerald. So, The Great Gatsby, the famous work of F. Scott Fitzgerald, critiques the American dream through rich imagery and symbols like the green light and the Valley of Ashes. So thus this particular novel explores about illusion, desire, and disillusionment. The second writer was Ernest Hemingway, and Ernest Hemingway's writings is very minimalist. Okay, what he calls the iceberg theory. So, in The Old Man and the Sea, which was a very famous novel of his, we can see that in the particular novel, the hero struggles silently against his faith, and questions often focus on his prose style, themes of masculinity and endurance. The fourth writer was William Faulkner. So he was known for stream of consciousness technique and Southern Gothic themes. You should remember that William Faulkner was known for stream of consciousness technique and Southern Gothic themes. The Sound and the Fury is a challenging debut novel of that talks about time, memory, and the declining family in the American South. Next is T.S. Eliot. Who don't know T.S. Eliot? So T.S. Eliot was born in America, but later he became British. So The Wasteland, the famous and most asked chapter or topic, we can say, in our English literature exams. So The Wasteland is one of the most important poems in modernism that we should definitely study. And The Wasteland, it was particularly filled with fragmentation, multiple voices, and allusion to mythology and world literature. It is very much important for our NET exam as well. So you should definitely read T.S. Eliot and other writers that I have discussed under this modernism period. The fifth section was Harlem Renaissance. So we can say that this was a very cultural movement that happened in 1920s that is centered in Harlem, New York, where black artists, writers, and intellectuals, they expressed their pride in African American identity. And the first writer was Langstonhughes. So he is the poetic voice of Harlem Renaissance. Poems like Harlem means what happened to a dream deferred, deals with racial injustice and dreams. And he often used jazz rhythms in his poetry. Next is Joran Ale Hassan. So her novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God, it mainly focuses on a black woman's journey to independence and love that she found in the end. And Hassan's style mixes folklore, dialect, and feminism, and it was very likely to be asked in character-based questions. So you should definitely read about Joran Ale Hassan's the work, Their Eyes Were Watching God. The last period, that was postmodernism and contemporary literary period. Postmodern American writers, they explore the fragmented realities, metafiction, trauma, and identity politics, especially after the World War II. And the first writer was Toni Morrison, and he was a Nobel laureate. And her novel, the most famous novel, Beloved, deals with slavery, trauma, and memory. And questions may ask about the magic realism, collective memory, or black womanhood regarding Toni Morrison and her every work. Okay, so it's definitely read Toni Morrison. Next is Sylvia Plath, who was my personal favorite. So she was a confessional poet whose aerial poems and the bell jar reveals about themes of mental illness, societal pressure, and identity. So be prepared for the feminist interpretation of Sylvia Plath and her works in NET. You can expect question in a certain region section. You can expect a direct MCQs based on a work or on a life. So be prepared for everything related to Sylvia Plath. Next is Arthurmiller and his famous work, The Death of a Salesman, critiques about an American dream and shows that the tragedy of a very common man. And it also questions about how a common man faces some tragedy or tragic scenarios in his life. So question often focus on family dynamics and realism in drama. Next is Edward Albee, and his most famous play, Who is Afraid of Virginia Woolf, is a very psychological drama which talks about exploring truth, illusion, and existential dread. So he is a part of the absurd tradition in American theatre. Now, after all this explanation, if you are confused about how to prepare with the right strategy for American literature, then you should, I'm going to share some tips before your exam, because you should know how to tackle American literature if you haven't studied American literature yet. First, you should focus on the authors that appear frequently in past year papers, and for that you have to solve past year papers, and you should look thoroughly into those past year papers like T.S. Eliot, Toni Morrison, Langstonhughes, Ernesthemingway, Arthurmiller. These are some of the writers that was mostly asked in our English literature exams, particularly in UGC NET exam. Second, you should memorize at least, if you have time, you should memorize every work of his, but if not, then you should definitely memorize the major works and match them with the theme, styles, and you should remember the date of publication as well. Third, you should know about all the literary movements of American literature, because association region question may also come. Okay, so you should know about Romanticism, Modernism, Harlem Renaissance, Realism, Transcendentalism, and every movement that I talked. Okay. In the end, you should practice the PYQs and you should give mock tests to analyze that if you have studied all or not, if your study preparation is going better or not. So to sum up, American literature is very crucial, diverse, and scoring if you prepare smartly. And if you all like today's video, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Also, if you want me to make a video on any topic you want, you can ask me in the comments. I'll definitely try my best to bring that video for you guys. Till then, be safe and keep loving literature, and I'm going to see you all in the next video.